All right. Gather round, folks, and let me tell you about the night the earth whispered secrets. Picture this: a moonless night, deep in the heart of old Mississippi. Cypress trees standing tall like gnarled fingers against the star-dusted sky. We were just a bunch of kids then, full of fire and foolishness. We'd been telling ghost stories all night, but none of us were prepared for what we were about to find. We were out there in those woods, huddled around a flickering fire, the flames casting dancing shadows all around us. The air was thick with the smell of pine needles and damp earth, and a shiver ran down my spine. But it wasn't just from the cool night air. Something felt off, like the woods themselves were holding their breath, watching us from the darkness. The fire crackled, sending sparks into the night, and we all fell silent, listening to the whispers of the forest. Suddenly we heard it, a rustling in the underbrush, a sound that didn't belong. Our hearts pounded in unison, eyes darting to the shadows beyond the firelight. We strained to see, but the darkness was impenetrable. Then, out of nowhere, a figure emerged, cloaked in shadow. We couldn't make out its face, but its presence was undeniable. It moved with an eerie grace, as if it were part of the night itself. We were frozen, unable to move or speak. The figure paused at the edge of the firelight, and for a moment, time stood still. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, it vanished back into the darkness, leaving us with more questions than answers. The air seemed to grow colder, and the fire's warmth felt distant. We huddled closer together, seeking comfort in each other's presence. The night was far from over, and we knew we had to stay vigilant. As the hours passed, we kept our eyes on the shadows, waiting for any sign of the mysterious figure. The forest was alive with sounds, but none as unsettling as the silence that followed its departure. On the very first night of our camping trip, we learned that the woods held secrets far beyond our understanding, and as the first light of dawn broke through the trees, we considered heading home right then and there, but decided we were overreacting. It was all just our nerves. Looking to put that dark night behind us and salvage the weekend getaway, we decided to go check out this old tree we saw on the hike-in. We'd heard tales about this tree, stories whispered by the folks in town. They said it was a wishing tree, a place where dreams went to die. We were young and dumb. We thought it'd be fun to dig around, see if there was any truth to those old wives' tales. Well, we found something all right. Not a pot of gold or a magic lamp, but something far more unsettling. The shovel hit something solid. We all stopped, hearts pounding in our chests, brushed away the dirt, and there it was. A small leather-bound diary, its cover cracked and faded with age. We passed it around, each of us taking turns reading from its brittle pages. The words were faded, written in a spidery script that spoke of a time long past. The diary belonged to a man named Jedediah, a fella who lived in these parts more than 100 years ago. He was a simple man, a farmer by trade, who had a deep connection to the land and the mysteries it held. His words painted a picture of a dark and hungry presence in the woods, a presence that seemed to whisper to him in the dead of night, calling him deeper into the forest, something ancient and evil that called to him from the depths of the earth. He often wrote about the feeling of being watched, of eyes that seemed to follow him wherever he went. He wrote about strange symbols carved into the trees, symbols that seemed to pulse with a life of their own, glowing faintly in the moonlight, symbols that made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. These symbols were unlike anything he had ever seen, and they filled him with an inexplicable dread. He described rituals performed under the light of the full moon, gatherings of shadowy figures who chanted in a language he couldn't understand, offerings made to appease a creature that lurked beneath the surface. These offerings were often strange and unsettling, like bones and blood, left at makeshift altars deep in the woods. Jedediah believed this creature fed on fear, on the very essence of life itself, draining the vitality of those who dared to venture too close. On the very essence of life itself, leaving them hollow and empty, mere shells of their former selves. and he was determined to stop it. He spent countless nights in the forest, searching for clues, trying to understand the nature of the beast. But his words grew more and more frantic, his entries shorter, as if whatever he had awakened was closing in on him. The once coherent and detailed accounts became disjointed and erratic, as if whatever he had awakened was closing in on him. He wrote of shadows that moved on their own, of whispers that grew louder and more insistent. The last entry in the diary was just a single sentence, scrawled across the page in a shaky hand. "It knows I'm here." This final note was a chilling testament to his fear and desperation. And with that, Jedediah's story came to an abrupt and terrifying end, leaving behind more questions than answers. A sudden gust of wind howled through the trees, whipping the flames of our campfire into a frenzy. The temperature dropped and the air grew heavy, filled with a strange energy that made it hard to breathe. We looked around, our eyes wide with the mixture of fear and excitement. Had we stirred something up by reading Jedediah's words? Had we awakened the very thing he had warned us about? The fire sputtered, sending sparks flying up into the darkness. The shadows from the trees seemed to stretch and writhe, taking on monstrous shapes that danced at the edge of our vision. A low growl echoed through the woods, sending shivers down our spines. It was a primal sound, full of hunger and malice, and it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Then we saw it. A pair of eyes, glowing like hot coals, appeared in the darkness beyond the reach of our dwindling firelight. The forest, which had been eerily silent, seemed to hold its breath as those eyes locked onto us. It was as if the very night had come alive, watching us with a predatory gaze. They weren't the eyes of any animal we'd ever seen before. They were too large, too knowing, and they seemed to pierce through the darkness with an unsettling clarity. We had encountered many creatures in these woods, but nothing like this. They were too big, too intelligent, and they burned with an ancient hunger that chilled us to the bone. It was a hunger not just for flesh, but for something deeper, something more primal, the kind of hunger that spoke of eons of waiting and watching. The creature moved closer, its massive form slowly emerging from the shadows. Each step it took seemed to make the ground tremble, and the air grew colder with its approach. We could see its silhouette now, towering and menacing. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen, a grotesque mockery of life itself. Its body was a twisted amalgamation of forms, as if nature itself had gone mad in its creation. The sight of it was enough to make one's stomach churn. Its skin was slick and black, like that of a catfish, and its limbs were long and spindly, ending in claws that scraped against the ground. The sound of those claws dragging across the earth was like nails on a chalkboard, sending shivers down our spines. Its head was the most disturbing part. It was a grotesque parody of a human face, twisted and malformed, as if sculpted by a deranged artist. It was vaguely humanoid in shape, but its features were twisted and grotesque. The eyes, however, were the worst part. They seemed to hold a malevolent intelligence, a burning hatred that was almost palpable. Its eyes, those burning embers of malice, seemed to bore into our very souls. They were not just looking at us, they were judging us, weighing our worth and finding us wanting. In that moment, we knew we were in the presence of something ancient and evil, something that had been waiting in the dark for far too long. Fear, raw and primal, surged through us. We scrambled to our feet, scattering in different directions. I stumbled over a root, fallen to the ground, the diary slipping from my grasp. I could hear the creature moving through the underbrush, its heavy breath rasping in the darkness. I didn't dare look back. I just kept running, my heart pounding in my chest, the sound of my own breath echoing in my ears. I didn't stop running until I reached the edge of the woods. I looked back, but the creature was gone. The woods were silent. The only sound, the beating of my own heart. We never went back to those woods, not at night, not alone. The memory of that night, of the creature with the burning eyes, stayed with us, haunting our dreams to this day. Now, some folks might say we imagined the whole thing, that we let our imaginations run wild after reading that old diary. But I know what I saw that night. I saw the hunger in those eyes, the ancient, insatiable hunger of something that's been alive for centuries. And I know it's still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next unsuspecting victim. So the next time you're out in the woods, especially at night, listen carefully. You might just hear it whispering your name, because some secrets, well, they ain't meant to be buried forever. And some things, once awakened, can never truly be put back to sleep again. Now, remember that old leather diary I found on our hike in? It's in my pack. Someone handed it to me, and let's see what it says. Ha ha, I'm just kidding.